And a good Thursday morning, Eagle fans. That's right, Thursday, which means the countdown is now at 1 week to the NFL draft, or at least round one of the NFL draft. Then you'll have 2 and 3 on Friday, and they'll wrap that bad boy up next Saturday. So we got time to talk about it. We'll talk about it for the next 2 hours here on Birds 365 with your Mac guys, John McMullen and Jody McDonald. Plenty of draft talk today. We got 2 good draft guys, Eagle/draft guys, that will punch up as guests. But first things first, another lottery ticket, J-Mac. Another draft-proofing signing by the Philadelphia Eagles, or as I like to call them, safety nets, because that's what I think they are. Eagles yesterday signed a guy that you've been talking about for 2 weeks at least, as one of the wide receivers left on the free agent market the Eagles may have interest in. Olamide Zaccheaus. Get used to saying that name, or maybe not, over the next however many months. Former Falcon who will be coming to the Philadelphia Eagles to compete for a wide receiver spot. We knew the Eagles were looking at potentially getting a veteran wide receiver before the draft. Do you like this signing?
I mean, I don't mind it in the perspective you just put it in, as, you know, another lottery ticket to come in and compete. I was a little surprised that receiver wasn't in the group that they had for the so-called draft proofing, or whatever you want to label it as. So it took longer than I expected. I thought they would bring in some kind of body at wide receiver, and he just made so much sense because he's a local kid. He's on the market, went to St. Joe's Prep. Everybody's excited about that. Magnolia, he's from 2 towns over from where I live. I mean, it just made so much sense, and he's a slot guy. Plus, he's got a little bit of punt return ability. He's 25. Checked all the boxes for what the Eagles have been doing. They want those younger players, potential, maybe some potential upside, cheap, which is the most important part. And it got done. So, I don't mind it. But, you know, if things fall on draft day, day 2, day 3, and they get a receiver, you know, we might not be learning the name, as you mentioned. We might not have to learn. So it's another one of those guys. You know, he could be the starting slot receiver in week 1. He could be off the team in week 1. It's another one of those things.
Right, which I'm sorry, Eagle fans, I just can't get excited about. Understand you want to give yourselves a specific look to your roster before you even get into the draft, and then certainly before you open up camp. Olamide doesn't excite me. He's been in the league for 4 years. He's an undersized guy. I would like to see the Eagles get a bigger third wide receiver. There have been great slot wide receiver little guys, the Amendolas of the world. Yeah, I don't think he's one of those guys, or hasn't shown that to be the case in Atlanta. Just for numbers' sakes, I get it. But this guy is another Jag, as far as I'm concerned. He's just a guy. He's not somebody who's going to be a difference maker. The Eagles have signed a bunch of Jags this offseason. And with the work they did prior to getting the Jalen Hurts deal done and the Mailata restructure, they're in good shape as of right now underneath the salary cap. We don't have details on the deal that was just signed yesterday. You're expecting 1 year, right? You don't think
that? Oh yeah, obviously 1 year. Probably under $2 million. It's the theme of the off season. It's a lottery ticket. It's just the latest one. For whatever reason, I mean, he had, his career year last season because, as I said, his age. Some versatility as far as special teams. It's a little bit surprising that he was on the market so long. But then you start to ask yourself, why was he on the market so long? My guess is they were just holding out, hoping for a better offer. because I think this offer's been out there for a while. And they were just, hopeful of getting a little bit more somewhere else. And it just never came. And now all of a sudden, remember the calendar. The Eagles are the last team in the off-season work. If you're a young player on that kind of deal, you want to be in for off-season work because you want to make an impression. So he took it as long as he could, and now the Eagles are starting their off-season work next Monday, and he'll get a chance to compete to make this football team. No question about that. Barring what happens on draft day. And this is not going to prevent Howie Roseman from doing anything. If he likes a receiver in the third round, for instance, Marvin Mims is a guy they looked at who looks to me like a natural slot receiver. That could be a guy. They bring him in and all of a sudden, he becomes less relevant. So you'll get a better view of sort of the landscape for Olamide after the draft, but he's, as I said, another draft proofing guy. So you don't have to force yourself. All right, we need a body at receiver. So you can't be in that position, or you don't want to be in that position. A lot of teams put themselves in that position. Eagles don't like to be in that position where they're saying, oh, we got a pick. Maybe they traded for a pick in the 5th round. We need a body at wide receiver, and we're just going to take the best receiver. They don't like to do that, and that's, sort of why they do these kind of signings.
And I thought that you were a bigger fan of his game because you had mentioned him several times here on the show. And when you texted me yesterday with the notice that he had signed, I said, they got your guy. And you said, not necessarily my guy.
Yeah,
and I'm going, what are you talking about? You've been talking this guy up for 2 weeks.
No, I thought they were going to sign him. And, I always say, I've tried to inform the viewers and the listeners that what the Eagles are going to do, not what I would do. And I thought they were going to sign this kid earlier in the process for all those reasons I kind of said, and they probably were. And as I said, he probably was holding out to see if, there was that last minute offer that maybe somebody, was going to ante up another $1 million or something. And when it didn't come, he said, all right, let's do it. And that's my guess of how it unfolded. But I always thought it made sense for what they need, what they were looking for. 25-year-old lottery ticket. Amazingly, he's younger than Britton Covey. So, he could be involved in punt returning as well. Just made a lot of sense for what the Eagles were doing, what the Eagles were looking for. I mean, I have nothing against him, but I wasn't pounding the table like Nick Sirianni to go sign this kid. I just thought it was a natural fit for what they were doing. And it turns out that it was.
Right. And my stance has been he's not good enough. If he turns into a Jag, just another guy. And that's how I would look at him right now with what he's done so far. 5'8", undersized. He's got some speed. You worry more about the speed than I do, that we need to keep Quez because he can actually keep a defense honest. Well, you got to be able to catch the ball to keep a defense honest. I'll give the newest Eagle wide receiver credit. He does catch what comes his way. I think he caught 59 out of 60 targets, something like that. Those that were drops were bad throws. Those that were on his hands, he did make the catch. I'll give him that, but I think he's just another guy, and I would like to see the Eagles at the third wide receiver spot get a guy who's actually done something, a playmaker. And, I've thrown Jarvis Landry's name out there a couple of times. Now, Landry hasn't signed, and maybe he's still holding out belief that he's going to get a better deal too. You wondered why Zaccheaus waited as long as he did, probably hoping that someone would up the offer a little bit. Got to a point where he said, I better take the best offer the Eagles have out there if I want to go home. More power to him. And Landry hasn't signed yet, but I think he's the guy who's actually proven it in the league. And that's what I was hoping the Eagles were going to do rather than just another guy, because that's what I think they got yesterday, was just another guy.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously age comes into it. Obviously role comes into
Let
it.
me ask you a question about that. Age comes into it. On a 1-year contract, what does age have to do with anything?
Well, the hope is they want to develop the player and, guys grow together and he's here and he has success and you can easily re-sign him. He's cheaper. That's part of it as well. Um, you know, don't underestimate that aspect of it. Um, and then, but the bigger thing is, role. Like if AJ Brown, and we don't want to jinx anybody, if Devontae Smith gets hurt tomorrow, unfortunately doing off-season work, you got to go out and get somebody like that. You got to go out and get somebody like that. But as a third receiver, you want a role player. I always compare it to utility players in baseball. There's different. You don't just get the best player to be a utility player in baseball because it takes a certain mindset. It takes to be able to play different positions, to be able to play once a week. And baseball's changed a lot. I'm talking about my wheelhouse. And back in the old days, Luis Soho always sticks out to me. You'd see him once every 2 weeks and he'd get a big hit.
Yep.
It takes a certain mindset, and a guy who's a star or was a star wants the football. It's just their mindset, and it's not a natural fit when you're getting no traffic. And as good as Jarvis Landry has been in this league, on this team with AJ Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert, if those guys are healthy, he's getting no traffic, none, zero. So I think the biggest factor is the role bid. And that's why the best case scenario is to get a young receiver with some significant upside. And I'm not talking about, JSN at the top of the draft. I mean, he's too good. But you start looking down the list. I'm looking at my list, Cedric Tillmans of the world. I mentioned Marvin Mims. If you get a player like that with some upside that can sort of grow into that's probably the best case scenario. But now they're looking for Luis Soho. They're looking for somebody to make a play when you need him to make a play in a big situation, but he's not going to get a lot of traffic.
Right. So and I don't see Zaccheaus as that guy. I just don't. I will tell you that the guys, we can go through them quick. Morrow, Evans, Greedy Williams, Terrell Edmonds, Rashad Penny, and now this guy, assuming he's on a 1-year contract, which we don't yet know yet.
You could safely assume.
Okay, yeah. We certainly, we're at 99%. We can't say 100 because they haven't announced it yet, but we're at 99%. It's a 1-year deal. How many of these guys are going to be on the Eagles next year? I just ran you down a list of 6 free agent signings during this offseason. How many of them will play for the Eagles in 2024?
Because of the situation, I'm trying to think of all the players.
I just ran them down for you. I'll do it again quickly. Morrow, Evans, Greedy Williams, Terrell Edmonds, Rashad Penny, Zaccheaus from yesterday. How many of those guys will be here with the team past 2023?
I would put the over-under at 4.
4 will be here for a second year?
For a second year.
For a second year. No, I'm not talking about this year. I'm talking about 2024.
I thought you meant for
No.
For 2024, probably 2. Maybe I'm being a little harsh.
I'll take the under. If you're at 2, I'll take the under.
Well, remember, you need role players as well. So Nicholas Morrow, to me, is fine as a backup. Fine. Do I want him to start? No. Terrell Edmonds, will probably be in a situation where he'll either play well and play too well. So he's probably a guy that'll move on. Justin Evans, I don't know what to think of Justin Evans. I mean, he could be, he's the one, he's a complete unknown to me. Because he's got some talent from, his college days, but he had so many injuries. He missed 3 years. I don't know what to think of him. Zaccheaus, I think, has got a chance to be here, especially if he wins the punt return job as a backup. And I'm already forgetting half of the names.
Well, Penny is a key guy.
Well, yeah, Penny.
If he has
Penny's
a
like
17-game season that he doesn't get hurt, yeah, the Eagles will probably want to keep him depending on what else they do at running back. But then again, it's going to cost. His number's going to go up immediately. If he has a clean year and rushes for 1,200 yards, you're not getting him for $2 million for 2024.
Yeah, he's the same thing. If lightning strikes with him, he's sort of the same as Edmonds, even to a higher degree. If lightning strikes with him and it works well, we know he's the one guy we know he can play. Right. We've seen him play. And he's going to do really well behind this offensive line if he's able to stay healthy for the first time in his life. So I agree with you. I mean, he's going to make too much money, and they're going to turn the page. So yeah, it's all short terms. I mean, that's what 1-year deals are. They're short-term deals to plug holes and band-aids and all that kind of stuff. And you're hoping to get people in the draft that can be the long-term answers.
No, that's why I'm not worried about. You said, well, Zaccheaus is young. I don't care about young. When you're talking about a 1-year contract, young goes out the window to me. I don't care if you're 31 or 25. You can be either of those two ages. If I am leaning heavily toward believing you're only going to be on my team for 1 year, what do I care how old you are? If you're looking at a guy you think you can keep around, you're going to sign to a second contract, then yes, of course, age comes into it. If it's going to be a one and done deal,
well, that I would say focus on the role aspect. You know, I always get this question with receivers.
I say focus on the upside aspect. So focus on the talent aspect. Focus on the production aspect.
It's like fifth receivers. I always get fans because fans like big names. Like if you're a fifth receiver, you got to play special teams. You got to be good on special teams, and they want veteran guys who haven't played special teams in 8 years. And they're not going to be relevant for that particular role. Yeah, role's a big part of it. Very, very, very big part of it.
Yeah, I like a guy who fills a role of being able to make big plays. If you're talking about,
well, you got two of them, Jody. You don't.
What you just dismissed was you touched on it, but then you moved on from it quickly. What happens if Devontae Smith breaks his ankle week 2? And now all of a sudden you got Olamide, Zaccheaus as your number 2 wide receiver for the entire year.
Then you go out and get somebody else. You got 53.
You could go out and get Jarvis Landry, or you could already have Jarvis Landry.
You might be able to go out and get him, to be honest, because he's still out there. 53. You got 53 players. That's what you're working with. You got big play guys in A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert. You can't just build a superstar team of Pro Bowl players. You need guys to fit in the roles, whether that role is punt returner, special teamer, a guy, as I mentioned, who's not going to get a lot of traffic. And yes, you can't build your roster saying, oh my God, what if A.J. Brown gets hurt? You can't do it. I mean, it'd be great if you had 90 players to work with and it was Chip Kelly in college and he could just wave people in. Then, yeah, bring everybody in. But you got to find 53. You got to find 53 guys that fit a team. Role is a big part of it. I'm sorry, it is.
If you think Olamide Zaccheaus is going to be a great role player for the Eagles, see that's why. I didn't. Well, then why wouldn't you want a better player, more talented player? What is Zaccheaus bringing to the table? That
I want
the fact that he's willing to play on the punt team. That's the reason you're signing him over a guy who's actually been a starter and a borderline star in the league.
Well, I mean, again, you're going to get thrown the football maybe twice, maybe 3 times on a good week. Again, you can do the due diligence, and maybe Jarvis Landry is happy with that. I don't see it. This is a guy who's made the Pro Bowl multiple times. This is a guy who used to get the football all the time. And he's going to sit there and say, hey, Jarvis, we got to get the ball to AJ. We got to get the ball to Devontae Smith. We got to get the ball to Dallas Goedert. And oh, by the way, half of these fans want Bijan Robinson on top of that. And then you want Jarvis Landry. I mean, yeah, it's absurd at some point. It's not fantasy football. It's not.
Well,
It's not
did
video
they
games.
not bring in Ndamukong Suh, who was a multiple-time Pro Bowl guy who came into the Eagles to play partial snaps? You at least investigate. You find out if the guy's interested in it.
He was 35 years old, and a different time of his career. He is, by the way, very mature. He's got this reputation of being this terrible person. He's actually really bright, and he's matured a lot. And they brought him in November. If AJ gets hurt and Jarvis is out there, yeah, they'll bring him in. But they're not going to bring him in to be a part of this roster with AJ Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert healthy and ready to go.
I didn't know you had reached out to Jarvis and knew that he was more important to him was a role where he's going to get 100 targets rather than 50 targets.
Well, who's more? I didn't, but either did you. Who's more likely to be right? The guy who always get 100 targets, or the guy who always gets 100 targets and says, "Oh, I'm fine with never getting football"? I'll
tell you why I think I'm right. Because it's April 20th and he's not signed. If we had had this conversation in February, I'd go, yeah, John's probably right. We're sitting here. He hasn't signed a contract. It's April 20th. All the teams are opening up their camps. Yeah, I think that he might have to go, oh, shoot, I guess I'm going to have to take a lesser role this year.
All right. I mean, we'll agree to disagree. I mean, you want the player. I get it. But, to me, it's not fantasy football. It's not video games. Guys got to bid. You got 53 guys. You got to bid. Somebody's got to play special teams. The back end of the roster, wide receivers, always play special teams. That's part of the role.
Understood.
That's part of the role.
And without having talked to him, you lay it out to him. And if he's accepting, if he's not, if he still thinks he's going to be wide receiver one for a team, say, good luck, son. And you let him go good and land with another team. But I'd at least investigate. And the move has been made and they signed the guy. And I don't think the guy's much of a player. The fact that he was, and oh, by the way, he was wide receiver too. So he's going to have to accept his role with the Eagles. And I believe he will, because we are sitting on April 19th and he hasn't signed, and he's got to go, well, this is as good as it's going to get. I guess I got to wrap my head around it. I think you could have got a more talented player for that wide receiver 3 role. All right, coming up next, our buddy Tommy Lawler from eaglesblitz.com. You got to check out his website. I do whenever I get a tweet from him, and he tells me there's a new article up, and has been writing about the draft and a lot of different Eagle maneuvers, certainly the Hurts extension. We'll talk about it all with Tommy Lawler from Eagles Blitz next here on Birds 365.